For the next 3 weeks, the Carolina Panthers will be undergoing OTAs, which, by the way, are voluntary, but still, we saw a couple of vets that weren't out there, and there's questions about a 2-15 team not having guys show up for, yes, a voluntary period. How concerning should that be, if at all? I'll answer that question among other listener questions right here on the weekly Friday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. Why? Because on Fridays, like today throughout the offseason, I'm answering your weekly Friday mailbag question. So either at me or DM me. But, of course, follow me first on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for next Friday's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers, and a weekly Friday mailbag going into Memorial Day weekend. So safe travels to all of y'all who are headed out of town this weekend. And if you're staying in town, hanging out by some water, please be safe. And, of course, listen to the show and any shows that you missed over the last couple of weeks. Been a lot of talk about the Panthers draft class, even looking back at some past draft class like we did yesterday, revisiting the 2021 class, but appreciate each and every one of you and hope you enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. But before you do that, let's get into the weekly Friday mailbag once again here on Locked On Panthers. First, a question about OTAs, organized team activities, which, by the way, are voluntary. They don't got to be there. 9 practices, 9 days, 3 weeks. And Dave Canales broke it down to us the other day that really what they're doing is they're going through installs, especially on the offensive side of the ball. You got 9 days of installs, and that's what they're doing. And then they'll do it again in training camp. Then competition will begin, the preseason begin, and we'll finally have real football to talk about. But we are a long way away from that. Even still, the Panthers coming off 2-15 season, and you're wondering why were some guys not out there? Who's actually wondering that? Well, Gio, and I'm sure plenty of y'all out there. Gio says, for a team coming off of a 2-15 season, do you think veterans should place more emphasis on OTAs and other voluntary events? There's so much improvement that needs to happen in only so many days. And you're right, 9 days, 3 weeks. Then they have probably only a 2-day mandatory minicamp. In the past, it's 3 days they have that they can use, but we've seen Frank Reich only use 2 days, Matt Rule only use 2 days, maybe Dave Canales will use all 3 of those days. And he said that basically it's a final test to all the installs that they've gone throughout the offseason and letting guys know this is what we want to do when we come back and we'll go work out in the offseason. After all that, it's not necessarily that intensive. We've seen plenty of vets do it day 1 and then sit out day 2. They'll be out there, but it's not like they're doing a ton of work over those couple of days. But, well, your point's taken, though, Gio, that there is only so many days. But the real improvement's going to really have to come from the players individually in the offseason. And then once they get down to training camp, understanding the concepts that they've already gone through. And the hope is that they're doing their homework during that 6-7 week period where they're not out there on the field with the coaching staff. So to answer your question, as far as veterans that were out, that were not there, Jadeveon Clowney, he was MIA on Monday. And understand this, the media only gets to go out there for one of the 3 practices each week. So they were out there on Monday this past week. This upcoming week, they'll be out there probably on Tuesday after Memorial Day. Then the week after that, they'll be there 1 day. The mandatory mini camp, they'll be there for each of the days that goes on. It's not like the media has their eyes on everything that's happening. So Jadeveon Clowney may have not been there on Monday, but he could have been there the other 2 days this week. I don't know, but he was not out there. Neither was Josey Jewell, who's coming in to replace Frankie Louvu. Robert Hunt, he was also MIA. Eddy Pineiro, It's weird to see a kicker not there, but we went over that a couple of days ago. He wasn't out there. Caleb on Chase on. You have guys like Mike Strawn, who will be fighting for a roster spot, who was not there. David Moore, Cam Sims, Ashawn Robinson, and by my count, Hunt, Clowney, Pineiro, Jewell, Robinson. Those are 5 starters as of right now that were not out there on Monday for the first day of OTAs. Now, there was also a mini camp a couple of weeks ago that was also voluntary, and all those guys were out there. So it could be much ado about nothing, but still, I understand the team wasn't very good. Why aren't those guys out there? Well, Jadeveon Clowney is someone who I was surprised to see him sign this early. Now, his market's never been as high as it was as far as him signing the biggest contract he's ever signed since getting drafted out of South Carolina, #1 overall, and going to the Texans, the biggest free agent deal he's ever signed. He's not a guy I felt like would have wanted to be a part of the voluntary offseason program, and he's been there, but he's just not there. At least he was not there on Monday. Maybe he'll be there later this upcoming week or the next coming weeks. As long as he's there for mandatory minicamp, that's really what matters as far as like whether he gets fined or not. Robert Hunt, you'd like to see him out there as an offensive lineman. You're going to work on technique, but their work really doesn't get done until they put on the pads. So I'm not super concerned about that. Josey Jewell's played in this defensive scheme, so I'm not super upset either. It's voluntary. They don't have to be there. You would like to see 100% participation, especially from a team that was 2-15. But Clowney wasn't 2-15 last year. Robert Hunt wasn't 2-15 last year. Josey Jewell wasn't 2-15 last year. Now it was Ashawn Robinson. And really, you look at the guys, Eddy Pineiro, he's the only one who was on this team last year that missed out. So his situation seems to be financial. So you can totally understand why he would not show up. And that's not anything that has never happened in the league. All the time, there's players who won't come to the offseason program because they want to get paid. Look at Cincinnati right now. T. Higgins, he's not there because he has not signed his franchise tag. Until he signs it, he's not technically a part of the team. So he's not out there for the voluntary portion of the offseason. I want to see this team improve, but Bryce Young's there. And that really is the most important thing to me, that Bryce is working with Dave Canales, that Bryce didn't opt out of being there, which would be wild. But we have seen veteran quarterbacks in the past, like an Aaron Rodgers, not be there. That's not where Bryce is. He's not nearly close to being that this early in his career and even in the future. He needs to be working with Dave Canales, and he is doing that. You see plenty of the younger wide receivers out there. You see that J.C. Horn is available, and he's out there being a leader. Derek Brown's out there. Think of the positives right now. Totally understand the concern when you see those names not out there, but I'm not going to get too upset about it, if upset at all, that they're not taking part in something that is, once again, voluntary. Jake has a question about the roster. If you had to grade our roster last year as a whole, what would you have graded it based off of the draft and offseason moves? Would you say we have improved, and what grade would you give us now? Well, I'm giving last year's roster an F because they went 2-15 and were the worst team in the NFL. At no point did they hold a lead in the fourth quarter, which is historic. And also the 2-15 record is historic, as there has never been a team to go 2-15 until our Carolina Panthers last year. So they get a big fat F. I understand that you have guys like Derek Brown who were on the team last year. Frankie Louvu was on the team last year. Brian Burns was on the team last year. Talented players. The roster as a whole gets an F. When you're the worst team in the league, it's a failure. So big fat F. Looking at the roster like as a whole now, offensive line has certainly improved after it was putrid last season. A lot of that had to do with the injuries, of course, and some of the regression that we saw from Ike Ekwonu, probably attributed to those injuries that were next to him at left guard, but still got to be better. Quarterback play was not great. There are reasons why that was the case. We've been over that ad nauseum. Running back wasn't great until Chuba Hubbard took over. It got better, but still not nearly as good as we all expected it to be. Wide receivers, worst in the league this year. Deontay Johnson comes in. That should improve it. Adam Thielen's back. Xavier Leggett, we'll see how good he's going to be as a rookie. We'll see what they get out of Jonathan Mingo as a second-year player. I still have a lot of questions about that overall group. Tight ends, same thing. Jadeveon Clowney comes in. What is that going to look like defensively? I think they've gotten worse. Just don't think you take off Brian Burns and Frankie Louvu, and you get better. Derek Brown's back. That's great. The rest of the defensive line, still not good in my opinion. Linebackers, taking a step back again. Corners, they need another guy or two, if we're being honest. So, I mean, the roster offensively has gotten better. Defensively, it's gotten worse. And if they're scoring points and we're getting more games like the Falcons game a couple years ago, before everything fell apart with DJ and Eddy, and you look at the game against the Packers last year, which is something that Josh Klein brought up earlier this week, that's way more entertaining than even like the Texans game, which was a win, and the Falcons game last year, that was a win. And of course, all the games where they just could not score points at all. I'll take the points. I'm more of a defense and run the football kind of guy. It's more old school. But yeah, points after what I've been watching the last couple of seasons where this offense has been anemic, and that's being kind. I don't know what grade to give it. It's still like probably like a D roster until further notice, if we're being honest, Jake. They got to win games. They haven't played any games yet with this new core. I need to see them play. So F, but D, and really incomplete is the right way to grade them right now. So we'll see. All right, let's take a quick pause. We'll come back and answer more of your weekly Friday mailbag questions right here on Locked On Panthers. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because of eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Getting back to your weekly Friday mailbag questions here on Locked On Panthers. Ron has a question about Panthers salary cap. Simply asking, what's the Panthers' current salary cap situation? Glad you asked, Ron. Looking at the NFLPA public salary cap report, the Panthers have $6.9 million of salary cap space. By the way, all of the rookies have signed their contracts. Chaw Smith-Wade, Jaden Crumedy, and Michael Barrett, by the way, do not have top 51 contracts, so they are not against the salary cap. It's the top 51 contracts. That's what you look at. Below that, all those guys don't count against the cap. So the Panthers have just under $7 million of cap space available. And I'm assuming you're asking me, what's the situation if the Panthers want to go sign someone, say Stephon Gilmore, or another corner, or maybe getting a wide receiver, if that's what they want to do? I'm guessing that's what you're asking me. I know in the past when Scott Fitterer was the general manager, and he's no longer the general manager, he liked to have about $8 to $10 million going to season with to use for in-season moves. And I do think that is a pretty reasonable thing to want to do, to be able to have space to make some moves. Now, he was in on every deal, except for the deals that would have given the Carolina Panthers 2 first-round picks for a player that he and his predecessor failed to sign, and also didn't want to trade. But I digress. I would think that Dan Morgan may want to take on that same strategy. Don't think it's a losing strategy. I do think it is pretty wise to do that. Having Brant Tillis now, the EVP of football operations, come to work with the contracts and salary cap, he can help guide the Panthers through that situation as well once the season gets going. But even, of course, right now, as they still look to bring in some players, looking at some contracts where they could open up some space, Miles Sanders is the easiest one. $200,000 that they would save. So that would give them actually $7 million, not a ton, but it would give them $200,000 more dollars of cap space that they could utilize. My guess is if they did want to bring someone like Stephon Gilmore in, it would have to be, it's going to be tough because you need it to be right now for low guaranteed money. And then you could have some sort of incentive laden contract, which is what guys like him sign anyways. And you probably want to have some void years. Has not been the operating procedure here in Carolina so far this offseason. Do they want to buck that trend by bringing in a 34-year-old corner who's likely not going to be here past this season and then still would count against the salary cap for a season that's unlikely to yield a winning record, let alone a playoff appearance? Do you want to have someone counting against salary cap at that age who's not going to be here long term for this team? That's just a question that Carolina's got to ask themselves. And I also think you should ponder as a fan who desperately wants him. Just seeing the cap space is not that high. They could also let go Eddy Pineiro. That would save them $1.8 million. And that would be something that would allow them an opportunity to bring in maybe Gilmore, but you can't have only $1 million cap space. You need to have more than just that. They could also cut Terrace Marshall Jr. if they wanted to. And that's $1.4 million of salary cap space. I just don't see a ton that they can do. They could still, we haven't seen it happen. There's still a possibility that they extend Taylor Moton. That opens up a lot of space. They haven't done that right now. I would encourage them to do that. I think he's a player worth keeping around. It's not like they drafted a tackle who could take over in the future. That's something to still consider. So they have avenues. The one that they used was getting rid of Brian Burns, of course, and with Derek Brown, they gave an extension. They could do the same thing. Taylor Moton, if they want to, that can open up space. And that would really be the first step, in my opinion, to going out and signing someone like Stephon Gilmore, who may command a salary that would be pretty hefty for a guy his age coming off of a significant injury that he suffered at the end of last season in Dallas. Question here from Alex about, oh boy, the win total. I know you won't put out a prediction for win total this early, but would you say that expecting the Panthers to double their win total this season is a reasonable expectation? What about doubling it again the next year? So you recognize that I won't put out, I know this guy, by the way, so don't be offended by this, folks out there who are super sensitive. So I won't give you a win total, but you still are asking me a win total question, but then trying to get me to give you future win totals as well. Is that what's happening here? Well, yeah, I do think it's reasonable to expect that they're going to go from 2 wins to 4. I would really hope that would be the case. The offensive line being fixed in itself, to me, is worth at least those 2 more wins. The defense is going to be terrible. The pass rush is going to be terrible. The secondary is probably going to be pretty damn bad. I just don't think it's going to be a good D. But they should be able to run the football. That can take up some of the clock. They should be able to throw the ball even down the field, dare I say. I think that they're going to be much better on offense. How much better as far as the rest of the league-wise goes? Still not going to be a top half offense, but can they rank like 20th? That would be an improvement. 21st, 23rd, that's better than last, of course. So 4, yeah, I think 4 is reasonable. And if they don't get the 4, like if they only win 3 or 2 games again, then like that's concerning. And I guess it's less concerning if it's going to be like you're leaning on Bryce, which that's concerning. But if you have like Leggett plays a lot, Sanders plays a lot, Brooks plays a lot, you put in Wallace and some of the younger guys you brought in, if it's like complete youth movement, you start edging out some of the vets. But, man, 4 wins I still wouldn't feel great about. Now, if they only get the 4 this year and then they can double it to 8 and 25, like that feels reasonable. Baby steps. I get NFL not for long, meaning you're not going to be great for long, but also you may not be bad for long if you do the right things, which under David Tepper, this franchise has not done the right things. They're not close, but they're also like not that far away. To go from 2 to 4 to 8 would be great. And then after that, 16, right? If we're going to just continue to double the wins each season. I do think that is probably a reasonable thing to think. I've seen plenty of people say they're going to win 10. No, not 10. My barber keeps saying that. My God, he's going to, they're going to have problems at the shop if he keeps talking like that. 7, I would love that. That'd be totally fine with me. 8, 9, I've seen people say 10. I've seen people say 9. I just think that's a little a little too much. Like 6 feels like the right number, but like that's a good season for where this team was at last year, where they're at right now. If they win 6, that feels like a good number. Like 4, better than 2, but that's still going to leave you wanting more. Like 6 would be outstanding, in my opinion. That's not the win total I'm giving you finitely, but I don't know. 4 is reasonable, but I think they can do a little better. Not much, but a little better. Okay, let's take one more quick pause, and I'll come back and answer the rest of your weekly Friday mailbag questions right here on Locked On Panthers. When it comes to your financial future, you think you've done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. Now you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses, Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Okay, one more question, then you guys can go enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend without me, which, okay, that's fine. This is coming from Forrest, who I got a great kick out of this. Forrest from Alabama. Yeah, Forrest. Not that Forrest, but our Forrest from Alabama, who is a big Panther fan, asking me, do you think from what we've seen so far this offseason that maybe, just maybe, David Tepper has taken a slight step back? Possibly. Hard to say. Hard to say. He was still there on draft night in the war room. They still handed the phone over to him to talk to their draft picks. Don't really have a problem with that at all. He does own the team. He is going to be the guy agreeing to pay them the kind of money that they're going to be getting. And any time that they want to have a big deal, it's going to be Tepper. It's going to sign off on that. It's his right. Totally get it. Now, the situation that happened at Dilworth Neighborhood Grill was odd, and the fact that he even felt the need to go in there, and whether, I mean, you found it funny they put the guy's hat, that was an Eagles hat, off his head and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, okay, like how necessary is this? Just drive to the stadium. Why create headlines? No matter whether you felt like it was a positive or negative thing, it's just weird, just odd. Just keep going. I don't know. It's hard to say. Like Dan Morgan getting that job on the surface isn't very exciting because he's been a part of all the losing that's gone on the last couple of years. He was not a part of the 2021 draft class, in which we went over yesterday when we're revisiting it, but he has been here the last couple seasons leading the scouting department. And we have seen how bad the scouting's been. So I like the trades he's made. I think some of the picks make sense on paper in a way. And they look like they have a vision past just this season, which is a new approach. Every approach the last couple off seasons has been, got to win right now. How do you think you're going to do with Sam Darnold? How do you think you're going to do that with Baker Mayfield if he doesn't show up until the end of July? But that's what they thought they were going to do. David Tepper, though, hard to know. Hard to know whether he really has taken a step back. I think the hiring of Brant Tillis makes a lot of sense. They also got an analytics guy recently who a lot of people I know, just looking at NFL Twitter, have really felt highly of. Doesn't mean that's going to lead anything, but still seems like a very sensible hire that he's made, and seems like he's allowing these guys to really run the show right now. So we will see what the results lead to and how patient He really is. Like, if Bryce, someone asked me last Friday if Bryce has a bad season, will the Panthers be getting a new quarterback next year, like in the draft? Well, it's going to really depend on what David Tepper wants to do. Does David Tepper lose patience with Bryce and want to move on like he lost patience with Teddy Bridgewater and with Sam Darnold and every other quarterback they've had here in Carolina? Or is he going to stick by him or stand by him, rather? We'll see. That's really the true test of how patient is he going to be. They lost a lot under him. I understand patience is wearing thin. I don't know, Forrest. TBD. I'm skeptical because, well, he's David Tepper. All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter, at Julian Council, where you can get in next Friday on the weekly Friday mailbag. So either at me or DM me to get those questions into me right now. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And because Monday is a holiday, there ain't going to be no show. So I'll talk to y'all on Tuesday.